Ever been fined for something that just didn't make sense? That's exactly what happened to me. One morning, I took my dog out for a walk, something I do every single day. It was a quiet, peaceful morning. Nothing unusual. We weren't causing any trouble, just strolling like always. Before we dive in, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on more stories like this. You're watching HA Stories, where we share real experiences and powerful journeys. And hey, drop a comment below letting me know where you're tuning in from. I'm curious to hear where you're all watching this from. Then, a few days later, I got a letter from my HOA. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But no, it was a fine. They claimed I was breaking some community rule about where dogs were allowed to walk. Apparently, I had let my dog step onto a small patch of grass that wasn't part of my property. Seriously? I couldn't believe it. It wasn't like we damaged anything. There was no mess. No complaint. Just a silent, sneaky fine out of nowhere. And it wasn't cheap, either. I tried to contest it, thinking this had to be a misunderstanding. But nope. They doubled down. They pointed to a rule buried deep in a document nobody ever reads. One that even long-time residents didn't know about. That's when I realized what kind of game I was dealing with. It wasn't about rules, it was about control. The HOA was treating small, everyday actions like criminal offenses. And I wasn't the only one. My neighbors had stories too. Petty fines, random warnings, even letters threatening legal action over lawn decorations or trash cans left out for too long. At first, I thought about just letting it go. Just paying the fine and moving on. But something about the way it happened, how unfair it felt, it stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about me walking my dog. This was about power. And I wasn't about to let them push me around without a fight. It didn't take long before things got worse. After that first fine, I thought maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe they were just being extra cautious. But nope. A week later, another letter showed up. This time, it said I had violated property boundaries by letting my dog sniff near someone's yard. Not go into it, just near it. I was stunned. My dog wasn't digging up plants or leaving messes. He was on a leash the whole time. Still, they slapped me with another fine. And they made it clear, one more incident, and they'd take legal action. Legal action. For walking a dog. I started feeling paranoid every time I stepped outside. I'd check around like I was being watched, wondering if someone was hiding behind curtains, taking notes. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't ignore the pressure. I talked to some neighbors about it, and guess what? Same story. One guy got fined for leaving his trash bin out for an extra hour. Another got a warning for having a basketball hoop in his driveway. Every little thing was monitored and punished. That's when I realized the HOA wasn't protecting the neighborhood, they were policing it. They had turned into this small-town authority, handing out punishments for things that made no real impact. And nobody seemed to know who was even behind these decisions. Just a bunch of names on papers, making rules that didn't make sense. I tried reaching out to the HOA board, thinking maybe I could talk to someone, explain the situation. But they didn't want to hear it. They said the rules were clear, and if I didn't like them, maybe I should consider moving. That's when something in me shifted. I knew I had to do something more than just argue. After that phone call, I sat in silence for a while. It wasn't just about the fines anymore. It was the way they spoke to me, like I didn't matter, like I was just some annoyance they had to deal with. That's when I hit my breaking point. I wasn't going to move. I loved my home. I had worked hard for it. Why should I be the one to leave? Just because someone in a suit decided walking a dog was a crime? No. That didn't sit right with me. So instead of backing down, I did something different. I started digging. I spent nights reading every single page of the HOA agreement. Line by line. I learned how the board worked, who made the rules, and how they enforced them. What I found out blew my mind. The whole thing ran like a private club. A small group of people had full control, and barely anyone else had a say. Most homeowners didn't even show up to meetings. That's when it clicked. If they were using the rules against me, maybe I could use the rules against them. So I started researching property laws, local ordinances, and how HOAs were structured. I found out that if you own a large enough portion of land in a development, you can influence, or even control, board decisions. It was legal. It was possible. It would take time and money, but I had both. And the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I wasn't just going to complain about the system. I was going to flip it on its head. This wasn't just about a dog walk anymore. It was about taking power back from the people who thought they could bully others without consequences. Once I had the plan, I didn't waste time. I started small, quietly buying a plot of land that had been sitting vacant for years. No one thought much of it. Just a regular purchase. But I wasn't done. I kept going. Any piece of land or property that came up for sale in the neighborhood, I looked into it. Sometimes it was a small patch of grass near the entrance. Other times, it was a foreclosed home that the bank wanted off its hands. I wasn't buying these places to live in them. I was buying them for leverage. Each purchase gave me a little more power in the HOA's structure. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just let them keep sending their silly letters, not knowing the ground beneath them was slowly shifting. Then, one day I crossed the threshold. I owned enough land to call for a vote. And when that meeting happened, they didn't see it coming. The same people who had ignored my calls and brushed off my complaints now had to sit and listen. I proposed a series of changes, starting with removing the fines for dog walking, then striking down a long list of other ridiculous rules. But I didn't stop there. There was one particular piece of land, one they had used as a so-called common area, where all their signs and rules were posted. I bought it. Legally. Quietly. And once it was mine, I put up a new sign. One simple message: private property. No HOA access. You could feel the shock ripple through the neighborhood. People started asking questions. Talking. Suddenly, I wasn't the guy being fined. I was the one rewriting the rules. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was real. At first, people were confused. Some thought I had lost it. Others thought I was bluffing. But once they saw the HOA couldn't enforce their usual fines anymore, everything started to shift. Neighbors who used to avoid speaking up suddenly found their voice. They started asking me how I did it, what they could do, and if it was too late to push back. I didn't tell them to fight. I just showed them what happens when someone finally does. The board tried to challenge me at first. Sent letters. Threatened to take me to court. But I had everything lined up legally. They didn't have a leg to stand on. Every time they pushed, I pushed back harder, this time with the law on my side. Funny thing is, the people who used to glare at me during HOA meetings started nodding instead. They realized they had been living under rules they never agreed to, enforced by people they never voted for. With enough support, we rewrote the bylaws and restructured the board entirely. The same people who fined me were now being voted out, one by one. The common area I bought? I turned it into a small park. No fences. No signs. Just a quiet space where dogs could walk, kids could play, and no one had to worry about fines or violations. I started out just wanting to walk my dog in peace. But what happened along the way taught me something bigger. Sometimes, standing up for something small can lead to something no one sees coming. People who felt powerless started to feel in control again. And all it took was one person saying, "Enough is enough." As the changes started to take hold, the atmosphere in the neighborhood completely shifted. The pressure that had once felt so suffocating began to ease. People started to feel like they could breathe again, like they weren't constantly walking on eggshells, afraid of breaking some obscure rule. It was empowering to see. But what really surprised me was the ripple effect. Other neighborhoods, hearing about what had happened, began asking questions. They reached out to me, wanting to know how they could push back against their own HOAs. The sense of empowerment wasn't just local, it spread beyond the boundaries of my own community. People who felt powerless, like I had, realized that they didn't have to stay silent anymore. I'll be honest, there were moments when I doubted whether it was all worth it. There were challenges, legal battles, and a lot of people who didn't understand what I was doing. But looking back now, it's clear that the biggest lesson was this: power isn't just something people have over you. It's something you can take back, too. Now, when I walk my dog, I do it with a sense of pride. Not just because I'm free from fines, but because I know I took a stand. And I didn't just fight for myself, I fought for everyone who had felt controlled and restricted by the rules that were supposed to keep things fair. If you've ever dealt with an HOA or felt like you were being unfairly treated, I want to hear your story. Maybe you're dealing with something similar right now. Drop a comment below and let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more updates. The fight isn't over, and neither is the journey.